Last year, I read my first LitRPG novel, and it's safe to say that I have been going down the rabbit hole ever since when it comes to progression fantasy content. I got on the Discords, I got on the subreddits, I read all the highest rated series, I followed the indie publishers, I got on their newsletters. But somehow, in all the kerfuffle doing all this research, I somehow missed out on probably the key place that you should be going if you want to check out new, awesome progression fantasy content. That, of course, being Royal Road. Now, for those who aren't familiar, Royal Road is a platform where basically anybody can go on and publish their writing, get feedback in real time, get ratings and reviews, and actually connect and build a community. And over the last few years, basically it turns out like the last decade at this point, it's basically become the de facto home for progression fantasy, cultivation fantasy, Gamelit, and LitRPG. And it's really only recently that I have been going on there and really diving into what it means to find success on that platform as an author, and also checking out some truly inspiring and creative writing over there. Now, I should caveat and say that not everything you're going to read on Royal Road is like the best thing you ever read. Is editing maybe a little bit sparse? Sure, absolutely. But you're also experiencing some of the best and most creative series. I guarantee some of the biggest series in the world in LitRPG are going to come out of Royal Road in the next few years, because some of the biggest ones you're already reading now, well, they already did. Some of the biggest series that you see now on Patreon, or stubbed as they would say, and now featured on places like Kindle Unlimited, got their start on platforms like Royal Road, or just outright over there on Royal Road. So what does it mean to be on Royal Road in 2025, and what really makes it the home of LitRPG? Let's talk about it. So Royal Road now has been around as a platform for quite a few years, but it's really sort of in the heyday, sort of at least from my understanding of this, back in sort of 2016 through 2018, that it really started to become the home of LitRPG as that was evolving as a genre. Now, really a lot of this stuff started off from a cultivation standpoint, started off in China, and then from like a pure LitRPG standpoint, really came out of Russia. But there weren't a lot of American authors or Western authors producing this kind of content. But one of the places they started posting it was Royal Road. But what really ended up taking off and solidifying itself there were things like fantasy and things like Gamelit. The early days of LitRPG really focused on sort of that VR MMO experience, thinking like, not isekai as we would think about it today, where a person is literally reborn in another world, but someone putting on like a VR headset as an example, think of like a Sword Art Online, and going and living a second life in a VR environment, whether that means you die in the game, you die in real life, or not. And a lot of these stories found a home on Royal Road and really just ended up taking off to a point now where they have amassed hundreds of thousands of views, likes, and ratings. And the biggest series have now gone on, I should say, to be featured in places like Kindle instead, where these authors can more directly monetize on them. But a lot of folks got their places, those sort of humble beginnings, posting one chapter at a time, because that's really what Royal Road is all about. It's about serialized content. And one of the reasons I wanted to make this video is because as I have dove more into the platform into the last few months, as I've been reading more, I've realized that me personally as a human being don't necessarily, serialized content's maybe not for me quite so much. But I also wanted to appreciate it as a writer, how it changes the way we perceive books and writing. Because for the longest time, books have gotten, formulaic, for lack of a better word. You have sort of your opening sequence, you introduce the characters in the world. If you're talking a traditional fantasy story, you have sort of the call to action, the call to adventure, the start of the hero's journey. You go through, you have some trials, you have some tribulations, things all go horribly wrong. Maybe the main character rallies, you have an epic third act, a massive climax, and a conclusion, and things round out. And maybe the world opens up a bit, you have the start of a story, or things draw to, maybe a happy conclusion, or maybe not. But overall, when you think of sort of the standard progression of a science fiction or fantasy book, depending on how, traditional it is, you kind of expect what's going to happen. But what's so interesting about, Royal Road as a platform is that because it's written in serial, because of the fact that people are putting out chapters, on average, 2,000 to 3,000 words at a time, they are not beholden to that same style and formatting. Books don't necessarily go. It's less about a book and more about an arc and the way arcs are tied together. And no, I don't mean advanced reader copies. I do mean arcs in the sense of a storyline and a progression. And because of these lack of limitations or these restrictions, authors are doing things that are unique and are creative and are taking different approaches to the way they're weaving their stories and their characters together. I mean, yeah, it sometimes causes them problems when they go to try and chunk out those books after and put them up on Amazon. And yeah, you get some weird pacing for some of those things in the situations, especially for some of these series that have gone on for like 14 books, Defiance of the Fall. But still, you end up getting some really interesting and creative formats when you end up putting these things together in that serialized style. Now, for a lot of these top authors, they're no longer posting on Royal Road. They have built up these massive Patreon communities, and they're functionally doing the same thing, but just over on Patreon instead. But even like things like the biggest stories you see, things like Dungeon Crawler Carl, which again eventually transitioned to Patreon and Kindle, etc. But a lot of these series ended up being featured on Royal Road for a long time. And one of the reasons that I wanted to profile and highlight it here is because if you're someone like me who is only recently getting into lit RPG as a genre, you may not necessarily know where to go to get a ton, and I mean a ton, of awesome free stories, because that's what's so cool about this as well. The base platform, everything about it is free. And yeah, sometimes you got to deal with an ad, but oftentimes you'll have things where authors are actually shouting each other out, doing like review swaps and stuff like that. And you actually, the ad that you're going to see in a profile is just from another author who's trying to get you to read their cool story too, which I will be honest is pretty darn cool. You can experience it on desktop, you can experience it on mobile, and I have been really enjoying some of the stories that I've been reading there of late. So much that I actually want to, as the back half of this video, shout out a couple of stories that I have been enjoying reading over the last little while. Now, of course, one of the places to find these up-and-coming stories, well, is, of course, Rising Stars. Now, Rising Stars is sort of like the Hollywood Walk of Fame when it comes to Royal Road, and getting on the Rising Stars is not an easy prospect by any means. In fact, there are multiple guides that have been published over the last few years talking about the best, most optimal process to get there on RS, or Rising Stars. A lot of the stories that I've found sort of in the last little while I found there, I've also found them in places like Reddit, places like Discord. And like I said, I do want to shout out a couple of them, but if you're someone here who'd like me is just sort of looking for, hey, what that might be that next read that I want to check out, I highly recommend going through and just taking a look through Rising Stars on this platform. I guarantee you're going to find some pretty awesome stuff here because the overall quality of the writing has dramatically improved over the last few years. So like I said, I had a couple that I wanted to shout out. Let's start with one that has now, book one has actually been stubbed. I realized as I go to make this video, I started reading it though. Book two is out there on Royal Road. I think book one is on Kindle Unlimited. So a little bit, we're starting off strong on this one. Great job, Paul, on your research for this video. Only going to realize now that book one has since been stubbed, but here we go. And that, of course, is Riftside by Henrik Sader. Now, this is, I want to say, one of the most like classic kind of lit RPG styles that you can find. It is basically like a Monster Hunter-esque type story, type world. If you enjoyed He Who Fights with Monsters, it very much feels kind of in that similar realm. It's about the son of a blacksmith who wants to set out into these sort of portals that exist, kill monsters, bring them back, level up, get these things called mind gems that allow you to sort of level. There's a very sort of traditional hard lit RPG system with stats and crunchy numbers and all that good stuff. And like a lot of traditional lit RPG stories, he ends up finding something early on that sets him on a very different path. In this case, a soul weapon that actually has a very defined personality, a lot of personality to say the least. This one's, has a fun little cast of characters. There's sort of an early romance as well that develops in it, but overall it just felt pretty wholesome and pretty solid. And I think the characters make smart decisions. They go about their days in intelligent ways, think about how they want to level up, think about how they want to progress, think about how they want to grind, and they approach it in a really pragmatic way that I very much appreciate while having a sort of wholesome and supportive cast of characters around the main character. Like I said, I'm pretty sure book one is now up on Kindle Limited. Book two is being posted still on Royal Road. I'm kind of surprised they stubbed it so early, if I'm being honest. Normally you leave these first books up for a while. You try to build up more of a Patreon following, but I did enjoy this one. I actually rated this one 5 stars. So if you're curious for one here, I'd go check this one out. Another series that I enjoyed, though I'm a little bit behind on now, I will be honest, is actually a series that I kind of beta read for. I connected with the author over on Reddit and ended up really enjoying just like really high quality like writing itself. And that is the Tattoo Summoner, which is a system apocalypse lit RPG. One that functions kind of in a very different way. It has basically, the world as does, goes all to hell. Portals open, magic is unleashed into the world, and the main character ends up developing an ability that allows them to use their tattooing skills to basically summon things, useful items, tools, monsters, etc., for themselves when they tattoo them on themselves and other people, which makes for some very interesting situations when, you're held at gunpoint at the start of the book, basically, and then you tattoo a snake on someone, and then that snake comes to life and tries to kill them. Good times are had by all. What really just honestly impressed me with this one is the overall quality of the writing and the prose. I was super impressed. It's definitely a lot different. Like it's, overall just sort of the tone and a lot of other things are sort of these darker sort of eldritch moments that are sort of tied into it too, but just the quality of like the banter and the back and forth, or even some of the more intense moments and situations, just really solid. I was just overall like impressed. Like, if you sort of took the lit RPG elements out of this, I think it would still really work as like a story. Like I said, I'm a little bit behind on this. Sometimes I guess, again, I'm less personally a fan of like just like every day read like 2,000 words. I like to leave things to stack for a little bit. But I have read the whole like first start of this book and I have really enjoyed it. So definitely recommend this one. The author's great. So definitely go check this one out for sure. And then the last one that I have really been reading recently is one called Shadowrunner, which is a very traditional cyberpunk story. And I do love me some cyberpunk, whether it's the video game, whether it's the anime, whether it's the board game and the writing. Ooh, just, yeah, I absolutely love cyberpunk as a genre. And this one 100% leans into it. Though there is a bit of a magical fantasy spin sort of layered into this as well, and it does actually take place on an alien world. So while humans are there and they're sort of the main focus and faction of this, there are some other elements that do sort of break it up a bit when it comes to this. But utilizing the idea of like classic mods and cybernetics, you think of your like Ripper docs and stuff like that. The language is there. It'll be familiar. It really lives on top of the very classical, like IP-driven cyberpunk sort of story, but adds enough of these sort of elements to make it their own. And again, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of inspiration, dug from Edgerunners, the idea that the young street kids who finds the piece of tech, kind of a job goes wrong, they end up installing it and it gives them this crazy edge. Yeah, it's a well done story, but it works. All right, it works. And I have been really enjoying this one for sure. This is one that I sort of binged and read like 25 chapters in like a day, which is the equivalent of, a decent amount of a book, as it were. But again, these are just a small number of stories. Like I said, if you go back to where Rising Stars is even right now, these top stories are constantly changing, but they're getting hundreds of thousands of views up at the top of the column. If you are an aspiring indie author who wants to try and write lit RPG, you need to be posting it on Royal Road. Like that is the place. If you look at like traditional stats for that place like Amazon, if you're just posting a book out to the wild, even with very little marketing on a platform like this, you would end up doing way better than if you just tried to sort of write a whole book and post it. Having the right strategy, posting consistently, building an audience, building a community, responding in the comments, being there on the Discords, in the subreddits. It's really been so cool to sort of dive into this world over, I would say, like the last 6 months as I've been equating myself more with this platform. And again, while for me personally, I don't love reading, like you get a ping on your phone, it's like, oh, another chapter. Like my life doesn't work like that, where I can really just take the time to sort of just like sit down and read 2,000 words at a time and then go back to what I was doing. But for those people who have like 10 series on the go that they're reading all at once, I know that this is just like it's a passion for a lot of people. Addiction, it's an addiction for a lot of people. Let's be real. And like I said, there is constantly new content being put out here. So many people releasing a ton of great writing, and the overall quality, from what I understand, is just going up and up and up. So if you are a fan of progression fantasy, cultivation fantasy, gamelit, or lit RPG in 2025, and you're not trolling the depths of Royal Road, or at least just Rising Stars, looking for your next big read, you are absolutely missing out. If you enjoy this kind of content, be sure to like and subscribe. I'm going to be focusing, well, if you've been watching the channel for the last while, I've been going, like I said, going down the LitRPG rabbit hole. So it does make a big difference for the algorithm. For myself, if you do end up liking and subscribing, it means a lot. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and I will see you on the next one. Cheers.